Humans are fascinated by gore and violence, but even more so the mysterious and unsolved. This interest in disturbing and unpleasant subjects is called morbid curiosity, and it has gripped hundreds of people throughout the ages. I am one of those people. My name is Hallie, and this is the Morbid Curiosity Podcast. My best friend once told me a story about a snowman she'd made one winter in her backyard. Her mother, who is Anishinaabe, a Native American tribal group, told her she shouldn't make snowmen because there was a chance they could become Wendigos. Being the media nerd I am, this description surprised me. According to the TV shows I watched, mainly the first season of Supernatural, Wendigos were man-eating humanoid beasts that lived in the forests of northern Minnesota and the rest of the upper Midwest. They were humans who had turned cannibal and were cursed for it. My friend said she'd never heard that Wendigos were cannibals, and told me that from what she knew, they were creatures associated with winter, that they took part every year in the battle against spring, and if you went out into the cold alone, you were in danger from them. As I dug deeper, I learned that in the Native American legends, Wendigos are many things, but most of all, they are very dangerous. The word Wendigo is an English pronunciation of the Ojibwe word Wendigo. By the way, I want to apologize now and in advance of all the words I'm going to pronounce incorrectly in this episode. I researched how to pronounce them and asked Ojibwe-speaking friends, but I won't get them all correct, so I sincerely apologize. I also want to apologize for some of my source material. Though I searched for materials produced by the people that these legends belong to, it was difficult to find sources that weren't written by Caucasian anthropologists. Feel free to write to me at morbidcuriositypodcast@gmail.com if you have anything to add or want to make a correction. The Wendigo is part of the traditional lore of a number of Algonquin-speaking peoples, most notably the Ojibwe, Cree, Naskapi, Innu, and Saulteaux. The descriptions vary, but common to all these cultures is the view that the Wendigo is malevolent, man-eating, and supernatural. So the WB show at least got those parts right. Wendigos are closely associated with winter, the north, and the cold, as well as famine and starvation. Basil Johnson, an Ojibwe teacher and scholar from Ontario, Canada, described the Wendigo as follows. The creature was thin, to the point of emaciation, its skin pulled back tightly over its bones. The bones pushed out against its skin, its complexion ash-gray like death, and eyes pushed deep into its sockets. It looks like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. Unclean and suffering from eating flesh, it smells of decay and decomposition, death and corruption. Among the lore of the Ojibwe, Eastern Cree, West Main Swampy Cree, Naskapi, and Innu, Wendigos are often described as giants. Whenever they ate someone, they grew in proportion to the meal they ate, therefore they could never be full. They are simultaneously gluttonous and starving. The many other descriptions include glowing eyes, long yellow fangs, a long tongue, sallow yellow skin, a body covered in matted hair, a body made of ice, and a heart made of ice in the shape of the human it came from. Though the descriptions differ, most agree the creature is driven by hunger. There are also various explanations for the creature's existence. Some legends say the Wendigo was once human, but was transformed into a creature by magic. Others say a Wendigo is created when a human resorts to cannibalism in order to survive. Still others say those who commit sins are turned into Wendigos as punishment. Lewis Bird, a Cree elder, relates a detailed legend on the creation of Wendigos. He states that the Cree belief is that anyone who suffers a shortage of food for a long period of time loses their mind and falls under the illusion that humans are just other animals to eat. They eat humans, crazed by their hunger. They never regain their right state of mind, even if they come back into a time of plenty. Their proper being was destroyed when they ate the flesh of humans. They may behave like an ordinary person, but the craving for human flesh is strong. He says it's like being an alcoholic. They just need a little bit of flesh in their system to pretend they are all right. When a person is in this state, they are no longer human. The taboo against cannibalism doesn't bother them. They just want to eat again and again. Their hearts become ice, without sympathy for the people they kill and eat. The evil of the Wendigo is so powerful that when other people pass by this person, they get a chill down their spine. Bird also states that a person can become a Wendigo due to mistreatment. If they are constantly mistreated, neglected, and bullied, they might walk away one day and return as a Wendigo. They might not eat flesh, but they are cold and changed. When white settlers moved into the areas occupied by these tribes, the stories of the Wendigos told at trading posts frightened and intrigued them. Incidents of Wendigos and the people possessed by them were recorded as early as 1661. One of these accounts was published in the Jesuit Relations, an annual chronicle of the Jesuit missions in the New World. It reads as follows: "These poor men, according to the report given us, were seized with an ailment unknown to us, but not unusual among the people we were seeking. They are afflicted with neither lunacy, hypochondria, nor frenzy, but have a combination of all these species of disease, which affects their imaginations and causes them a more than canine hunger. This makes them so ravenous for human flesh that they pounce upon women, children, and even upon men, like variable werewolves, and devour them voraciously, without being able to appease the glut of their appetite, ever seeking fresh prey, and more greedily the more they eat. This ailment attacked our deputies, and as death is the sole remedy among those simple people for checking such acts of murder, they were slain in order to stay the course of madness." In the legends, the Wendigo is seen as an embodiment of gluttony, greed, and excess. Even after killing and consuming a person, it still hungers. It is never satisfied and constantly searches for more victims. Once a Wendigo is created, how do you stop it? Apparently, the only way is to kill it. However, the Wendigo is so powerful that just killing them is not enough. The body must be burned, especially the heart. Anything that has touched their blood must be cleaned, and their body, as well as all their possessions, must be burned to ash. Then the area where they were burned must be avoided. The most secure way to kill a Wendigo is to destroy their heart, which may be made of ice, or be a small ice version of the person they were before they became a Wendigo. This ice person must be killed in order for the Wendigo to stay dead. There are several similar creatures in other tribal lore. Kewakuo, or Giwakwa, is the name of an evil man-eating ice giant of Abenaki legend. A Giwakwa was once a human and either became possessed by an evil spirit or committed a terrible crime, such as cannibalism or withholding food from a starving person. This caused their heart to turn to ice. In some Abenaki legends, these creatures were primordial man-eating stone giants. The Cree call them Witiko. They are evil giants that feed on the flesh of men. In some legends, they are equivalent to the boogeyman, while in others, they are people who have committed sin and turned into Witiko as punishment. They are coated in ice, and in some tales, looking at them leaves a person paralyzed. A Witiko cannot be killed unless its icy heart is melted by fire. The Iroquois and Huron tell of the Stonecoat, a mythical rock giant. Some tales say there is only one, while others say there are many. They are twice as tall as humans, and their bodies are covered in rock-hard scales that repel normal weapons. They are associated with winter and ice, and like to hunt and eat humans. Some of the legends say they were once humans themselves, but were cursed for becoming cannibals. In other legends, they were never human, but a tribe of primordial man-eating creatures, created by a malevolent hero. Micmac legend tells of a beast called the Chenoo. Wendigo and Chenoo are sometimes used interchangeably. They are solitary and will fight other Chenoo. When they battle, they grow as tall as trees and use the trees around them as weapons. They make noises like a lion's roar but more shrill and live in the coldest reaches of northern Canada. In summer, they coat themselves in balsam fir sap and roll on the ground, covering themselves in moss, leaves, and small sticks. Their strength depends on the piece of ice which sits where their heart should be. This piece of ice is a perfect little human figure. If the Chenoo has killed other Chenoo, it may have many ice figures inside it, and the more they have absorbed, the more evil they become. A female Chenoo is always more powerful than a male. Different from the Wendigo, if the ice can be taken out of the Chenoo, it can be cured. There are several well-known stories about the Wendigo or Chenoo. I'd like to share two of them with you to better illustrate the types of tales told and the reaction of the people to the creature. In one story, a group of 10 families went north by canoe for a hunt. Among them was a beautiful girl. A young man in the band wanted her for his wife, but she refused him. His pride was wounded, and all that was savage in him was roused. He wanted revenge. He was skilled in medicine and magic, so he went into the woods and gathered an herb that makes people lose their senses. While everyone else was asleep, he held the herb to the girl's face until she inhaled its odor. She could not be easily awakened. Going out of the tent, he gathered snow and placed it in the hollow of her neck just below her throat. Then he left without being discovered. The girl didn't wake for a long time as the chill went to her heart. When she awoke, she was chilly and sick. She refused food for a long time, and her parents grew worried. They asked her what was wrong, and she was ill-tempered, saying nothing was wrong. One day, she was sent to a spring for water and remained absent for so long that her mother went to find her. Through the trees, she observed her daughter greedily eating snow. She asked her daughter why, and the girl said the snow cooled the burning inside her. She craved the snow, and it tasted good to her. After a few days, she became fierce, as if she wanted to kill someone. She had been changed into a Chenoo. The girl knew this, and it was against her will. She begged her parents to kill her and told them if they didn't, she would be the cause of their deaths. She told them they must shoot her with 7 arrows, and if they killed her with 7 shots, all would be well. If not, she would kill them. She went inside the wigwam unbound. 7 men shot at her, every arrow striking her chest, but she sat firm and unmoved. 49 times they shot her, and from time to time she looked up at them and smiled. When the 49th arrow struck, she finally fell dead. The rest of the band burned the body. It was soon reduced to ashes, except for her heart, which was made of the hardest ice. This took much longer to melt and break. At last it was over. They left that place and never returned for fear that some small part of the body had not been consumed by the fire, and from it another Chenoo would rise. In another story, a family went away to hunt in the northwest. They found a good place to spend the winter and built a wigwam. The man brought in game. The woman dressed and dried the meat, and their youngest son played at hunting by shooting small animals. All was well until one afternoon when the woman was gathering wood. She heard rustling in the forest as if a large animal were approaching. What she saw was far worse than her fears. An awful face was glaring at her, one that resembled the worst of the devil and a beast. It was a haggard old man with wolfish eyes, naked, with his lips and shoulders gnawed away as if he'd eaten what he could reach of his own flesh. The woman knew this was a Chenoo or Wendigo, the being from the far icy north, a creature who is a man grown into a devil cannibal. The woman was terrified, but instead of showing fear, she greeted the Chenoo, calling him father, and pretended to be glad to see him. The Chenoo was amazed at such a greeting when he expected fear and screams, and in mute wonder allowed himself to be led back to the wigwam by the woman. The woman was wise and good, and pitied the man. She gave the Chenoo clothing and cleaned him. He sat by the wigwam, looking surly and sad, but kept quiet. This was all new to him. When he saw the woman gathering sticks, he approached her. She feared he would kill her, but instead, the Chenoo asked for an axe and felled many trees and cut them for firewood faster than a storm. Afterward, he walked into the wigwam without a word. When her husband returned, the woman ran out of the wigwam and told him all. He did as she had done and spoke kindly to the Chenoo. The Chenoo's face grew kinder, but he did not share in their meal. That night he slept in the wigwam behind a screen that shielded him from the heat of the fire, and the couple stayed awake in fear. For 3 days the Chenoo stayed with them, sullen and grim, but he began to change. One night he drank a pot of scalding hot tallow and became sick. He vomited up horrors and abominations, and when it was over, he seemed changed. They feared him no more. Unlike the first tale, the Chenoo in this legend is calmed by the kindness showed him and decides to change, reducing the evil inside him purposefully. This shows that the way a person is treated can change them into a Wendigo, or change a Wendigo back into a human. In the modern era, the symptoms for the Wendigo have changed slightly, but the main components, greed and gluttony, still apply. The modern Wendigo can be a person or corporation that wreaks environmental destruction and divides communities with their greed and racism. Canada and the United States are presently considered to be full of Wendigos. The worst of these destroy forests and wetlands in their desperate attempts to satisfy their craving for bitumen, a tar-like substance that is turned into oil through an intense process that causes vast environmental damage. The Wendigo also lends its name to a disputed modern medical term, Wendigo psychosis, which is considered by psychologists to be a form of culture-bound syndrome, with symptoms including an intense craving for human flesh and a fear of becoming a cannibal. In the historical record, there are reports of native peoples believing they have become possessed by the Wendigo spirit, what the Western doctors called Wendigo psychosis, leading them to crave human flesh. Western ethnographers, psychologists, and anthropologists were so fascinated by Wendigo psychosis that a widely debated controversy about the historical authenticity of the phenomenon blossomed in the 1980s. Some researchers argued that Wendigo psychosis was a fabrication, a result of naive anthropologists taking the stories that were told to them at face value without observing the phenomenon personally. Others argued that there was evidence of Wendigo psychosis being a factual historical phenomenon in the number of credible eyewitnesses to it. Either way, the frequency of cases of Wendigo psychosis decreased dramatically in the 20th century as Western culture and society spread amongst the boreal Algonquin peoples. The most common response amongst many of the Native American tribes when someone shows signs of turning into a Wendigo was attempting to cure them by way of traditional healing methods. If these attempts failed, the possessed person began either to threaten those around them or act violently. Reports indicate that they were then executed. Cases of Wendigos were rare, but it was more rare that they ended in execution. There are several famous cases of so-called Wendigo psychosis. One of these reported incidents involved a Plains Cree trapper from Alberta named Swift Runner. During the winter of 1878, Swift Runner and his family were in dire straits. They were starving, but lived only 25 miles from help at the Hudson Bay Company outpost. When his eldest son died, Swift Runner proceeded to butcher and eat his son, his wife, and his 5 other children. Given that he resorted to cannibalism so close to food supplies, and that he killed and consumed the remains of all others present with him, this case was not treated as a case of pure survival cannibalism, that is, consuming human flesh in order to survive starvation. This man was a Wendigo. He eventually confessed and was executed by the authorities at Fort Saskatchewan. In my research, one name came up more than any other in relation to Wendigos: Jack Fiddler. Jack's real name was Chawuno Gijigo Gaubo, but he earned the name Jack Fiddler by playing the violin at the trading outposts he visited to trade furs. In 1906, he was a chief and shaman of the Sucker people, a branch of the Anishinaabe that lived in what is now northwestern Ontario. Like his father, who was adopted into the tribe after appearing mysteriously from the east, Fiddler was renowned for his alleged ability to conjure animals and protect his people from spells. Most famously, he was a hunter of Wendigo. He claimed to have defeated 14 Wendigos, some that were set against his people by enemy shamans, and others that were members of his own tribe who were taken by the insatiable desire to eat human flesh. The family members of these people asked Fiddler to kill their very sick loved ones before they turned. Sometimes the person themselves asked Fiddler to kill them. In fact, Fiddler's own brother was killed after turning into a Wendigo when he ran out of food on a trading expedition. The Wendigo legend was well documented in the Hudson Bay Company's records, and Fiddler's reputation grew amongst them and the other tribes in the area. Many Western traders tried to convert him to Christianity. He listened, but declined. In early 1907, 2 Northwest Mounted Police visiting the area heard of Fiddler's power against the Wendigo. They went to the sucker camp and arrested Fiddler and his brother Joseph for the murders. They also took an eyewitness with them and declared that all the men in the tribe must give up all their wives but one. For many of the sucker people, these were the first white people they had ever seen. Fiddler and his brother were charged with killing another brother's daughter-in-law the year before when she showed signs of turning into a Wendigo. While they awaited trial, newspapers got hold of the story and twisted it into a sensational tale of devil worship and murder. Across the country, people demanded conviction, and the police conducting the trial took this as an opportunity for fame and advancement. It was deplorable, but sadly the norm for many cases against Native peoples at the time. On September 30th, 1907, Jack Fiddler escaped during a walk outside. He hung himself nearby and was found later that day. His brother, Joseph, still went to trial. The eyewitness, a man named Angus Ray, stated that the daughter-in-law was killed while in deep pain and incurable illness. This was the custom of the sucker people, unaware of Canadian laws. When pressed on the Wendigo issue, Ray explained that Jack and Joseph Fiddler were the ones that were usually asked to perform this duty, and it prevented those people from turning into Wendigos. Despite his testimony and the pleas of the Hudson Bay Company missionaries, Joseph was convicted and sentenced to death. An appeal later secured his release, but the order came just 3 days after his death in 1907. Though the occurrence of Wendigos has lapsed in recent years, the legend has been kept alive due to media such as books, television shows, video games, and comics. Algernon Blackwood's 1910 horror story, The Wendigo, brought the legend into the realm of horror fiction, and it has held a place there ever since. Stephen King, the well-known horror writer, included a Wendigo in his novel Pet Sematary. William Kent Kruger published a mystery thriller called Wendigo that harkens back to the original legend. Wendigos appear in games such as Dungeons & Dragons, Warcraft, and Until Dawn. They also feature in multiple television shows: Supernatural, Sleepy Hollow, Charmed, Blood Ties, Teen Wolf, and The Blacklist. The legend of the Wendigo is terrifying. Anyone you know could potentially become a Wendigo in the right circumstances. But the legend is more than that. It endorses treating other people with respect and warns against greed, gluttony, and cannibalism. It suggests if one behaves like a monster, their humanity is lost forever. And that is why it terrifies us, fascinates us, and stirs our curiosity. The Morbid Curiosity podcast was produced by HMS Lloyd. If you want to get in touch or suggest another morbid topic for me to talk about, you can tweet the show at Morbid Podcast or join us on Facebook and Instagram at Morbid Curiosity Podcast. If you like the show, please follow and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. My name is Hallie, and until next time, thank you for listening.